I've got a 3-part series for you on layoffs. It's not isolated to layoffs, but I want to talk about everything that surrounds them. The first part is about why they happen. I think really the top 7 biggest reasons why they happen and how you can spot the warning signs. That's what we're going to do first. That's this session. The next session is going to be about how do you prevent yourself from actually ever getting laid off? So what are those strategies that you can and tactics that you can implement to make yourself indispensable at work so no one would ever think of laying you off, no matter whatever dire straits the company is in? And then the third part is really going to be about if you happen to be affected by a layoff, how do you bounce back strong? I've got 10 steps for you to take in order to reclaim your career. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3. If you're watching this on a recording, you're in part 1, so you're in the right spot. If you're here with me live, great to have you. I think this is going to be a ton of fun, or at least as fun as I can make layoffs. Okay, so first thing is I do want to mention that I think the primary thrust of this first portion is really about how do you detect a layoff's going to happen? How do you know it's going to happen? That way you can kick into the tactics to make sure that you're best positioning yourself to avoid it. Or if you're joining an employer, how do you detect whether or not they might be susceptible to laying people off? And the real gold in this is I've got 16 questions that I think are absolute doozies for you to be able to detect, triangulate, determine the likelihood that a layoff can occur. But in order to go through those 16, I want to start with the areas that I think you need to focus on, which are the reasons why layoffs happen in the first place. So I want to run through these quickly, but I do want to do them a little bit of justice, but I want to go through them quickly. I've got 7 reasons. I've thought long and hard about my career, all the companies I've recruited for, evaluated, coached people into just what was happening with them. These are the 7 things that I think are the biggest reasons why companies let people go. Number 1, finances. I don't think that's surprising to anybody. If you're not financially stable, you're not going to be able to hang on to your employees. But financially stable could be one thing. You might be in a unit that doesn't have enough budget allocated to it. You might not always be able to detect. The company might be solid, but they may not be investing in that area that's still financially related. So if the company is not stable financially, that's going to be probably one of the biggest reasons. And I know a lot of people that I coach, they're joining early stage startups. Some of them are joining startups I coached a guy the other day, had 6 people in the organization. He's going to be employee 7 or 8. So they're that small, or they could be in their B round or C round or D round of funding. So they might be moving along a little bit, but anything can happen. And it also depends on what kind of startup you are. A lot of these pharmaceutical startups, it takes a long time to test these drugs, get them approved. So there's a lot of funding that needs to be kicked in up front. So anything related to finances, that's number 1. Number 2 is any kind of reorganization. So reorganizations can happen for all kinds of good or bad reasons. We might be reorganizing by consolidating teams because there's synergy and we can just be more efficient. Maybe we don't need 12 people, we only need 9. That could happen. It could be we weren't organized effectively in the first place and now we're actually getting organized. It could be I worked for an organization that was organized initially it was a free-for-all. So we had account partners. I was an account manager. I was setting up the account management practice, and it was just who was available and who had the workload available to pick up an account. Then we reorganized into solution types so we can develop more expertise around the mechanics or business functions or technology solutions. Then we reorganized the next year, and we were reorganizing by industry type so we could get even deeper with our areas of expertise. All of those were good reasons, but they did affect people along the way. So watch out for the reorgs. Then there's mergers and acquisitions or divestitures even. So is one company acquiring another? Are you with the acquiring company or are you being acquired? It's not necessarily good or bad to be one or the other. It depends. If I'm an organization that's acquiring another organization, I might just want to be acquiring the organization, leave them intact as is, because they have an area of expertise that we need. We don't need to do anything with it. They're just adding to our portfolio of available products or services or whatever it might be. Or we just might need more bodies to do something we're already doing. So you might be affected because they don't need as many resources. You had 10 in your company, they only need 5 more. There could be something like that. So you want to keep an eye out. There's a lot of other things that go along with M&As, and I don't want to make a whole discussion out of that. But the one thing that I will say to you is if you are getting acquired or your company is acquiring another company, there can be a lot of benefits for staying and standing fast and staying put, because there are retention bonuses and other things and knowledge transfer that where you could really cash in. So there's a lot to those. But they're another reason why people get let go. The market itself might be shifting. We had craziness with COVID, right? The hospitality market shifted. That's a very precipitous example. But it could just be that the market is shifting because of advancements or better solutions or new products, or things are falling out of favor, right? Blockbuster wanted to continue to get you to rent their VHS, their VHS tapes when the world was shifting into streaming and better accessibility or easier access to on-demand videos. So anything could be occurring, and I alluded to it, but technology advancements are a big reason why we tend to let people go, because technology advancements, what usually accompanies them is a more efficient way of doing something. I've told this story a number of times where not just a couple of years ago, not even 700 days ago, I had 2 people that I deployed to take videos like the one that I'm in the midst of recording right now. One person would watch it and kind of chop it up for little bite-sized messages, and she would make notes, and she'd put labels in a spreadsheet, and then she'd turn it over to a videographer. It was a different person. I was probably spending $100,000 just on those activities for those 2 people alone annually. Now I use a system that costs $300 that Kara operates, so I don't need those 2 people to do those activities anymore. That's a technological advancement. The AI ability of that software product that I pay once a year for $300 is a pretty good deal, right? So there are technology advancements that do this, and I know that this is a popular one right now because AI is able to do a lot of things that humans could do or were needed to do that they aren't needed to do anymore. Poor decision making. Now, poor decision making comes in a variety of forms. It could mean I made a bad decision to invest in something in a market where there was no demand. But candidly, if you really look at history, that usually isn't the problem that sinks a company. It isn't because they go all in on something that doesn't work. Yes, that does occur. Yes, I could point to those examples. But most of the time, it isn't like that. It's poor planning. It's not being ready for what I call tomorrow's problems. So every time I'm looking at an organization and I'm evaluating whether I'd want to join them or whether I wanted to recruit for them or whatever it might be, or if I'm coaching somebody who's going into a company, and I always ask about the area that they're going into, and I always say, are they making good decisions about working toward tomorrow's problems? I don't even mean problems in a bad way. Everything that we do every single day, all of us as employees, all we do is solve problems. That's truly what we do. So when I wanted to augment the Mile Walk organization, where I was solely an executive search firm and I had some people and we were recruiters on behalf of organizations, and I wanted to add an arm to Mile Walk called the Mile Walk Academy, where I wanted to create products and services, online training programs, and coaching services that supported individuals, a business to consumer addition to the business to business company that I had already operated. I had a problem with no one knew me as that. No one knew I knew how to do that. So I had a community building problem. And then I had a product building problem. I had to create something to sell if I wanted that to be a business as opposed to a hobby or charitable donations. So I had to figure out, well, how do you build a training product? Then I had to figure out how to market it. Once I marketed it, and needed to figure out how to sell it. Once I sold it, if I kept selling more, I was going to need to figure out how to service it. So I'm always thinking in advance of what is the next problem I'm working toward. If organizations cannot tell you that, you're getting yourself into a bad position. What's a great example that I know affects a lot of people? Are any of you consultants? Do you actually work for an organization and you're in great shape because you're on an assignment and that client who you're on assignment with is paying your organization for you to be there? Except what about when that assignment is done? Well, that's a tomorrow problem. You need to be sold into another account. And if you don't have an organization that has a healthy pipeline or knows how to keep that going without these ups and downs, right, you're going to be susceptible to being let go if you're sitting on the bench, as we call it. So that's what I'm talking about. Those could be a big part of why organizations let people go is, well, we hurried up and we sold so much of this, and now I need to slow the selling down, so I got to let people go. So you get the idea. And then performance. It could just be that the organization thinks that you're not performing well. They want to let you go. Maybe they're doing this in mass where they're evaluating people once a year and deciding if you haven't been able to fulfill your performance improvement plan, we've given you enough notice and now we're going to let you go. This happens. So these are my top 7. So I wanted to start there and just spend a few minutes on these because I want you to have an idea where I'm going with the questions I want you to ask. Now, I want to shift over into the questions that I want you to ask. I've got some slides here to make it really easy for you to pause the video and screenshot this stuff if you want to add these to your arsenal. But the one thing that I want to say before I get into these particular questions is there are a lot of great questions to ask an organization anytime you're interviewing or even if you're an employee and you're investigating what the landscape looks like. Now, these 16 should be used as complements to the other questions that you're asking. So I'm not saying this is a holistic list. I'm saying that these are the ones that I feel will really help you detect the probability or susceptibility of an organization to layoffs or right, to business going down, any way you want to look at it. And every time you ask a question in an interview, you're always looking for 2 pieces of information that's going to answer your question, these 2 questions. Is it a good organization? And is it a good organization for me? Now, a lot of these questions today are aimed at, is it a good organization? Meaning, is it solid? Meaning, is it solid? And there are going to be a lot of other questions that you're going to want to ask to know whether the culture is completely aligned to you, your behaviors, what you like, that style, because everybody has personal preference. But I want to make that point because it's really important for you to know these 16 should be a complement to anything else that you're going to be asking. Cool? Cool. All right, let's get into these slides very quickly. I'm going to take a sip of this tea. How's everybody enjoying this so far? Click that like button if you're loving where we're going with this. All right, let's talk about financial health and stability. So I said finances were a big thing, right? All right, first one, can you share insights into the company's financial performance? So a lot of you might be able to grab the 10K and look at the financial performance, but most of you statistically will not be joining a publicly held company. So it's going to be a private company or an investment-backed company. You might not have public information related to the finances of the organization. You're just trying to see what they can tell you about the organization, its finances, whether they're growing, maybe what their percentage of growth year over year is, what they're investing in, and all that good stuff. And then along those same lines, practically in the same breath, I don't just want to know, well, what's the financial performance, is what's your revenue streams and how diverse are they? So if you're joining an organization and they are heavily invested in one sector, but they're not balanced, it leaves them very susceptible. One time, we MileWalk recruited for a consultancy that was a network infrastructure consultancy, and their primary area of expertise was the capital markets sector. So they built wide area networks and high-speed networks for trading companies. And when I was talking with the CEO to determine if we were going to work together, I asked her these questions because it was at the time a 25-person company. And I said, well, how are your clients? How are your clients balanced? What percentages are within any one, and so on and so forth? And she told me, well, right now, 75% of our revenue is with one client. And she didn't think that it was a big deal because she sat on the board of that client and was an investor of that client and felt that that relationship was going to be sturdy enough to where they would never kick her consultants off their projects. But lo and behold, about a year or two later, that did in fact happen. And she started to grow the company, and it was probably 50 people at that time. We were helping them recruit. And sure enough, she had to wipe out 25 people in a week just because her one major account said, all right, we're going to take it from here. So you want to make sure that there is a distribution, whether that's industry distribution, solution distribution, and you're making sure that you're absolutely covered as far as the balance. And then you do want to talk about what is their strategy in past downturns or anticipated downturns. So if something happened and the market went south, what would you do? That's a fair question. If somebody asked me, well, Andy, if employment goes up, what would you do? If employment goes down, what would you do? I'd be able to answer you with how we're able to support any kind of uptick or downtick in the market. So you want to just get an idea. Those are a few to get you rolling. You also want to address the long-term strategy. There is nothing wrong with asking an organization where they think they're going to be in the next 3 years. And if an organization can't tell you that, I would pack it up and head for the door. Because I can tell you what life is going to be like in 3 years. I might not be able to tell you all the tools I'm going to be using, but I can tell you what I'm going to be doing, generally how I'm going to be doing it, the spirit of what I'm working toward, the projects I'm working on right now that are positioning me for something that far out. To ask an individual this question, I think is ludicrous, but to ask an organization this question, I think is smart. So make sure you're looking forward. And then where are they innovating? How are they ensuring that they're keeping up with new and innovative solutions in the market? What are they doing? Maybe they have dedicated team. Maybe they have a researching team. Maybe they have an innovation team. Maybe they have a product development team. There's a number of things that they could be doing. Just make sure it sounds logical and organized and committed to you. And then I would say, I want specific examples of when you had to shift. What do you view as a shift in the last 10 years? How many times have you shifted? What were those shifts? What did you do? These are fair game questions. They really, really are, especially if you're in some of the more volatile markets. All right. Then questions related to your role. I am not saying that you cannot join an organization if you are not getting into the most strategic arm of the organization. But I want you to know that if you're doing that at your own peril. So I want to make sure that if I'm joining an organization, I want to know that the role I'm on is working on a strategic project or a project that is their bread and butter, or product that is, or service that is their bread and butter, or one that they will continue to augment. Too many times do I see people taking jobs on a full-time basis. It's one thing if you're a contractor and they're looking to sunset some systems or some processes or some units and they need you on a temporary assignment, that's one thing. But if you're joining an organization as a full-time employee, you want to make sure you're joining in the most strategic area. You want them to help you understand where you are joining and how, in relation to their overall growth strategy, will you be contributing? And is this an area where you will be able to contribute greatly because they are relying on the success of this service or this product to be great in the market? What does success look like in the role, and how is it measured? And if you don't ask this, I'm personally going to come and tackle you, because I say this to you every week. You've got to know what success looks like, because if they're thinking success is way high, and there's no way you're going to be able to achieve it, or you think you can achieve it, provided they're committed to the level of resources it's going to take, the additional people they're going to let you hire, the training they're going to send you to, the budgets they're going to allocate for you, and all that good stuff. You need to make sure that when you're joining, you can hit those targets, because they might not have a mass layoff, but they might just lay off you. So this is something that you better know. I've talked about this time and time again. You knew it was going to be in here. And then I also want you to understand the relationship between your role, the team you serve, and then that team's position in the organizational structure. This loops back to number 7 with how you fit into the long-term goals, but really, how does my team fit in, and how does my team report in? Okay, so you want to make sure you're getting this stuff on the goal. Then I always will tell you this, and I will say this is incredibly, incredibly important for any of you that are joining small to medium-sized companies. You better pick the right pony, okay? It better be a thoroughbred or a team of thoroughbreds, because if you pick the wrong management team, you're going to be totally hosed. All right, so how would you describe their leadership style, but most importantly, as it relates to their decision-making process? I want to know how you decide things. So you need to be on the lookout. Well, first thing is we research, we look at the options, we have an innovation team, we create solutions, we look at the risks, we look at the upside, we look at the downside, we look at the ROI payback period, we look at aggregated return, annualized return, like boom, 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 boom. I want to hear it. And then I want to understand what happens if there's dissension, who gets to decide, when has there been dissension, how was that decided? I want to know that they have a legit process. I'm telling you, if you think that you're joining an organization where the leadership team are a bunch of hip shooters, if you think they are, they are. Because if they weren't, they would be able to dispel that immediately. Okay, so you just want to make sure that you're getting at that. Then I do want to know how you prioritize employee development. If they don't think developing employees is important, don't go there. Because trust me when I tell you, or employees that feel appreciated, employees that feel invested in, right? I'm invested not just in your well-being, but also in your education and your career development. And I'm spending a lot of time and a lot of money making sure you are learning the right skills so that you can actually make the most major contributions to this organization and grow your career. I want to take personal care with that. If they're not prioritizing that, that's bad. And if you asked me, well, how do you do that, Andy? I would say, well, it's a neck and neck tie between customers and employees, because we're not in business if we don't have customers, and we're not in business if we can't keep our customers. But the best employees are going to make our customers the happiest. And the best employees, they create the best widgets, they crank them out the fastest, they have the best time, they feel rewarded, they do things that ultimately the company benefits. So it's literally 1 and 1A, I would say. And then I want to see examples. Hey, what did you do in the rough times? I will remember when it was the dot-com bubble. So we're going back 25 years. And I worked for an organization, and one of the things that we did in order to ensure the health of the organization was, while a lot of consultancies, I worked for a tech consultancy, they were taking projects with a lot of these dot-com organizations, and the dot-com organizations didn't have a ton of money, and they wanted to hurry up and build something and then go public, and they were paying in shares. They were paying on the back end. They were doing all crazy and exotic kinds of deals. I worked for an organization that if we worked for a dot-com company, we required 75% of the project payment up front. Otherwise, we wouldn't work with you. So we had a portfolio that while we did have high-risk companies as far as their survivability, they weren't high risk to us because we got the cash up front. And what happened when the bubble burst and all of these companies started going out of business and the technology companies started laying off people, if you think layoffs today are bad, this is nothing like what happened in the early 2000s, where companies were disintegrating. I mean, every day. And so what happened with our organization is we had a very slow taper of layoffs that took years to do. And every time we did the layoff, we actually did a volunteer round first, meaning we'd ask anybody in the company if you would like to take a severance package, and this way we wouldn't have to forcefully lay off that would save one person. If you decided you wanted to volunteer and go, and we'll pay you for 6 months or whatever it was. We had all kinds of deals going, but we tried to make it as palatable as possible, even though we were going through a rough time. I could describe that and tell that story if you asked me. So you're looking for what are they doing to make sure that they're not just, hello, here it is, you're laid off, sorry, see you later, right? So that's a big deal. And then I do want you to investigate any kind of layoff history. Why'd you have them? This is an obvious one. Another one, well, what steps did you take? I just gave you an example, right, of some of the steps we took to avoid layoffs. Because if the market couldn't keep going up at that pace, we knew it had to level off at a minimum, if not pull back. So you want to make sure that you're getting at that. And what trends do you see impacting? So are you on the lookout? What do you think's coming down the pipe? What are we going to do if we encounter that? What kind of risk plan do you have in place? And 16, to round it out, how do you position yourself against competitors in the market? Where are we? How do we catch up? How do we catch them? How do we leapfrog them? If we're in front, how do we stay in front? How do we know our product is going to have demand and all of that good stuff? So I want you to just think about, as you go into, I'm not going to recap all 16 of those or the 7, but you get the idea. There are reasons that you get let go, and then there are questions that you can add into your list of interview questions that'll better help you evaluate whether you're even at a company and you maybe have some insight and insider information on this, or you're thinking about joining an organization. These are all fair game questions. And if you're in technology right now, which in my opinion is probably one of the more, if not the most volatile market because of the advancements of AI, you need to be asking this stuff. And if you're not, you're doing your own decision-making process a disservice. So if you want more on these types of questions, this is another great video to check out. When I did this video on my YouTube channel, I actually was very focused on the financial elements of an organization and making sure they were sturdy. So this is another great one. All right, so I hope you enjoyed. This was part 1 of kind of the 7 top reasons why I think layoffs occur and 16 great questions to ask to help you assess that. If you're here with me live, we're going to be rolling into session 2. If you're watching this on the recording, I'll see you next week.